In this video, I'm going to discuss the military usage of Alcatraz Island. As I mentioned in the introductory video, in 1775, Spanish explorer Juan Manuel de Ayala sailed into San Francisco Bay and named Alcatraz Island. However, from that time of Spanish settlement of the Bay Area until the late 1840s, when John Charles Fremont purchased Alcatraz for the United States from the Mexican government, the island had gone largely unused. The gold rush of the late 1840s, which included increased shipping traffic, would help spur the fortifications of Alcatraz Island. In 1850, a military board proposed a three-point defensive strategy for the bay, which included a fort at each point, north and south of the Golden Gate, and a third fortification on Alcatraz Island. This photo over here shows the view of Alcatraz Island from the Golden Gate Bridge. So you can imagine the importance of the island in protecting the bay if the need arose. The ships coming in from the Pacific Ocean into the bay are coming directly at that island, so its fortification would have been really important. Also, I want you to keep in mind that the Golden Gate Bridge was not built until well into the 20th century. So in these videos, when I'm referencing the Golden Gate, we're just talking about the strait that connects the bay to the Pacific Ocean and not the bridge itself. Construction on the island began in 1853, and by the time the Civil War broke out in the early 1860s, Alcatraz would have been fortified with well over 100 smoothbore cannon. It would have had rows of open gun emplacements carved out into the island slopes. And it might be hard from this far away to tell how much the island slopes, but in pictures later, you'll be able to see the drastic incline of the island, very similar to the rest of San Francisco. So it would have had those emplacements carved out into the slopes. It would have had a fortified gateway, sometimes called a sally port, protecting the road to the brick citadel at the highest point on the island. The city of San Francisco would have become a target for Confederate raiders. It would have been a very tempting target. And Alcatraz, along with Fort Point down here on the south of the Golden Gate, we can zoom in a little bit to see Fort Point, would have been very key to the U.S. Army's Western Defense Plan. More than 400 soldiers were stationed on the island, but eventually the increase of military technology would have rendered Alcatraz's defense system obsolete. And in 1907, the Army formally decommissioned Alcatraz as a fortification. However, that would not end Alcatraz Island's military usage. In fact, it would continue to be used as a military prison, and it had been used as a military prison as early as 1859, which was just 6 years after the beginning of the fortification process of the island. In 1859, 11 soldiers were scheduled for confinement in the Sallyport basement, and they arrived as the fort's very first permanent garrison. During the Civil War era, soldiers were convicted of desertion, theft, assault, rape, murder. Citizens who had been accused of treason, crew of Confederate ships were imprisoned on the island. The Army also used Alcatraz as a place for incarceration of different Indian tribes through various wars with Indians in the mid to late 19th century. The island was also used for military convicts during the Spanish-American War in the late 1800s. When the fort was first decommissioned in 1907, regular Army troops were replaced by soldiers of the U.S. Military Guard. Within a year, the Army had begun tearing down the citadel and building a huge concrete cell house. At the time of its building, I believe construction began on that cell house in around 1912. At the time of its building, it would have been the largest concrete building in the world. In 1915, Alcatraz was renamed United States Disciplinary Barracks, Pacific Branch. And it wasn't long before World War One military prisoners, generally conscientious objectors, were added to the inmate population at Alcatraz. During the Great Depression in the 1930s, coupled with prohibition and rising crime coming out of, we would have seen a lot of interest for Alcatraz Island from the Bureau of Prisons or the U.S. Department of Justice. And in the early 1930s, the War Department would transfer Alcatraz Island to the U.S. Department of Justice to begin the new or second era of Alcatraz Island's history, United States Penitentiary, Alcatraz Island.